Joe Sacco's Palestine, what worked for you, what didn't? Anyway, do you think that Sacco's method as a visual medium for relating history is a great way to reach those who aren't familiar with the Palestinian side of the conflict?
Yes, I did quickly page through Sacco's book, but did not read it carefully because for me, the comic media is not interesting to me. I didn't grow up with that. I didn't read comic. It felt to me that putting it in a comic-like form was in a way unreal, because comics usually are not about real event, and that's one reason why I did not read Sacco's. I know of the book, obviously, and I paged through it, but did not read it carefully. And I don't think it's a good way to transmit what happened. Maybe people that are totally not knowledgeable or familiar and comfortable with comics, it could be.
The next question references the types of closure. The first type I want to talk about are scene to scene, where there is a large amount of distance and time happening between captions. I want to give two examples. First, let's say that we have two captions in sequential order. One occurs 2,000 years ago in the Middle East in biblical times, and the next caption is 1947 at the creation of the Israel state. If you were to try to give someone closure by looking at these two pictures who doesn't really know what they're looking at, what would you tell them?
I don't know. I have no comment on this. I can't give you an opinion on this. It's hard for me to relate something that happened 2,000 years ago with the current event just by drawing a picture.
The next caption would be from 1947 at the creation of the Israel state to the present. Say you and me here having this conversation. What would you say is happening between these two captions?
Again, trying to visually express the suffering and the pain that the Palestinian had been subjected to somehow is effective, but also feels somehow unreal.
And I want to provide an example of a series of captions as what might be termed action-to-action captions. I find the story of your father sneaking back into Israel across the border and coming back again during the occupation interesting. Do you want to give a brief account of action-to-action series, what you think that this exemplifies in the overall story of the conflict?
We left originally because we wanted to spend some time in the mountain of Lebanon as a vacation and to get away from the war, which was coming very close to our neighborhood. The Irgun gang was going around killing people that were in their houses. But we found ourselves without any money and the border was closed. Father wanted to go back and sell some properties to get some money to live on. Only he couldn't sell the properties, but he had some merchandise he had bought from Europe. My father was a businessman. He could sell for a penny on the dollar, and people would come in and he would give them new merchandise he had bought for very little money, and came back to Lebanon with at least something to show for it.
As you were growing up and going to medical school and coming to the United States and bouncing around from state to state until you met Mom and settled down here in Minnesota, but with the growing distance between you and your homeland, obviously the closure is going to change, possibly becoming more and more difficult to relate back to Palestine, Israel, Lebanon. What meaning do you give to these removals in your life that you went through?
They weren't related to me being displaced. Me moving from state to state had nothing to do with that. It had to do with my career as a physician. So it was not directly related to the Palestinian experience.
In the previous question, we might have come to a general sense of non sequitur. Your movements were farther and farther away from your homeland, so it made less sense and connection. But considering this, do you think that the current situation with your family and your relatives living all over the place, is there still a sense of coherency from when you were all living on top of each other in the same house? Mimi is in Massachusetts, Jackie is in Houston, Pascal is in France, Roger is in North Dakota, Ibrahim has passed away. Where do you feel is a closure between all of you nowadays? Because you're just a phone call away, but in other ways, you're far from each other. Would you still relate this to what happened in 1947, or would you not?
The tradition in the Middle East is for family to live together, usually in the same building with different floors. For us, that didn't mean much because we left, we were very young. I basically was sent to school before the war. I was barely 7-year-old. So that experience does not apply to us.